Hello and welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Stephen Ryan.
And I'm Matthew Lucas.
And we post a video every week. So why not hit subscribe and the alert button to remind you when the next one comes up.
And every Monday we post a short where Stephen Ryan will answer your pressing horticultural questions. So if you have a question, put it in the comments below and do tell us where you're from and Stephen can answer it in 60 seconds.
Where you're from helps a lot.
But now, Stephen, where are we?
Well, today we're in the Royal Botanic Gardens, Melbourne.
One of my favourite places.
And it's about time. I mean, we should have been doing...
I blame you.
Yeah,
it's not a culture of blame, but it's your fault.
This is one of the world's great botanic gardens. So it's certainly nearby, so it's convenient. We've chatted to the director. He's happy for us to be here. And today we're going to talk about a range of cool to cold hardy palms,
which is something we've been brewing for a while. They've cropped up in a few of our videos, so we've been sort of formulating this idea about a cold climate palm story so that you, wherever you are, can have a tropical looking garden, even if you get sub-0 centigrade, sub-32 degrees Fahrenheit winter minimums. And look, Stephen, do I not see behind me a cunning cold climate palm? We haven't actually started, but what is this one?
Oh, this one is the Dwarf Fan Palm, which grows around the Mediterranean region. I've seen it growing up in the mountains in Morocco, right down onto the coast. And it's a fabulous dwarf, but rather bulky palm because it produces multiple trunks. And it's one of the very cold hardy palms. So it will go down to quite a few degrees below freezing. So you should be able to grow this palm in a good percentage of the areas of the world.
And I've seen pictures of this covered in snow.
You can certainly see it that way. And there's another form of it, which has silvery foliage as well, which is very desirable. So the argentea form of this particular palm is well worth looking out for.
Same hardiness?
Same hardiness. If anything, it's a little bit more drought tolerant, if that's possible, because this thing will grow virtually in the desert.
Will it? Okay, so we've covered water, we've covered temperatures. So when you say minus, what could it go to? Let's be as clear as we can for all our viewers around the world.
Well, I would say at least 3 to 4 degrees of frost is possible.
So that's minus 3 to 4 centigrade.
Yes. So
I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. I'll drop it in over the top.
Yes. So it will go down to quite low temperatures, certainly in parts of Morocco where it grows. It does get snow, it does get frost. And I can grow it in my garden, Macedon, without even thinking about it.
So I guess the only thing is, it's not your classic palm form with a single trunk and a lovely canopy. It's a clumpy, multi-stemmed beast.
It does, in fact, raise an issue. When people say dwarf, don't always assume that it means that it's going to be svelte as well as short. That doesn't always follow suit. So this one will be easily as wide as it is tall, and, you know, about 2.5, maybe 3 meters tall can be expected. It is slow though.
I was literally, you're psychic. I was just looking at that going, how old would that one be?
That one could easily be 80 or 100 years old.
Oh,
so,
goodness.
Yeah, so don't expect your dwarf fan palms to fill out in the garden in any sort of hurry.
So we're planting for the future.
Yes, we definitely are.
Unless you're lucky enough to have an established garden.
Oh yes, if you inherit one like this, well, you're a very lucky person.
All right, well, I think without further ado, we haven't even begun, but we should go and explore the gardens and find more cold climate palms.
We will indeed.
Off we go. Stephen Ryan, what is this beauty?
Here, right there, that's Trachycarpus fortunei, probably the best known and commonest of the cool hardy palms.
Or Stephen, a common palm.
Yes, it is. So it's commonly known as a fan palm or a Chinese windmill palm. It can grow quite tall. There are boy and girl ones, so that's quite like. Well, you need both if you want seed. But in some areas here in Australia, it's actually become quite weedy. So it would be nice if we could work out how to tell a boy from a girl before they flower, so that you could just plant boy ones and not get seed everywhere.
It's the same with guinea pigs. It's very hard to tell.
Yes.
Now, we have covered this in a few videos because it's quite common in Macedon, isn't it? So it was used like in 19th century gardens.
Yes, because of course in 19th century gardens, the whole point of those sort of gardens was to plant the exotic and the weird and the interesting. They saw palms as, rightly so, something very exotic. And so the Chinese windmill palm, Trachycarpus fortunei, is probably, debatably, but probably the world's most cold hardy palm. It can be grown in quite a number of parts of southern England. You can certainly grow it quite a ways up into North America. So if you're thinking of trying a palm in a less than tropical environment, this could certainly be my first choice to have a crack at, because it is well known to be really cold hardy. But this particular specimen, you will note, probably could do with a little bit of tidying.
Because this is the thing, fortunei, generally, whenever I've seen it, so you see it a lot in Italian gardens, and actually a lot here in colonial gardens. And so the trunk is very clean, and it has a very beautiful fan at the top. The canopy is really gorgeous. This, bless it.
Yes, the staff need to come in and tidy it up at some stage.
Tidy your room, get a haircut, get a job, palm tree.
Now, I just want to give a little bit of a hint, though.
Yes.
When you take those fronds off, they are fabulously useful if you've just planted some seedlings in your vegetable garden and you need a little bit of shade because you've got a few hot days coming up and they might struggle to adjust. You can stick the palm fronds stems into the ground and create a temporary shade house.
Seems slightly biblical. I'm getting a Moses vibe.
Yeah, well, there is a bit of that, but I do it quite regularly. So I save my dead palm fronds and I use them as portable shade houses.
And after you've done that, I guess you'd have to shred them and use them as mulch because they're very tough.
Yeah, the trouble is they often bind in a shredder and tie up the whole thing and stop it. I can put the stems down through the shredder. I've tried this, but the actual foliagey bits often just wind around inside and become a real problem. So you may have to compost them instead.
All right. So
or use them as kindling for the fire.
True, because they're very dry. Now, fortunei, named after Mr. Fortune, the great plant hunter.
Yes.
So again, context-wise, so we've looked at the dwarf clumping palm, which can go to sort of 4 to 5 degrees below 0 centigrade. What about fortunei?
Well, it will go even further.
Will it?
Yeah, so it is really the palm that you can grow in comparatively cold climates. So it just laughs at 5, 6, 7 degrees of frost, generally speaking.
Right. So is it a high altitude palm?
It's a more a high latitude palm, so it comes from sort of fairly far north, and that's always a good thing to look at as well. Where does the tree come from?
Yes.
So if it comes from a high latitude in the northern hemisphere, then chances are it'll be more cold hardy. And conversely,
yes, because we did a special at the Melbourne University, and the palm that's native to Victoria is quite south.
Yes, exactly. So it's not quite as cold hardy as what the windmill palm would be, but still reasonably cold hardy. And there are a number of southern palms which we'll hopefully meet in the Botanic Gardens today.
If they want to meet us.
That are southern latitude ones that are reasonably cold hardy.
All right, well, we should go and try and find some.
What a good idea.
A lawn of palms, Stephen.
Yes, well, the Melbourne Botanic Gardens, you'd expect no less because they are very popular Victorian plants.
They are. Now, I think maybe we just need to contextualise Melbourne's climate. So we're talking about hardiness. Melbourne's sort of in that sweet spot that our inner city temperatures never really get to 0 centigrade or 32 Fahrenheit. So we never freeze, never get frost in the inner city. You can the further out you get. The gardens, though, don't. And so we can grow Mediterranean, some tropical, some subtropical, and temperate plants. Many things.
We're very
blessed.
Fortunate here.
Horticulturally blessed.
But having said that, some of these palms around us are in fact surprisingly cold hardy.
All right.
And we've got 2 feather-leafed palms behind us, so they're not the windmilly type fan palms. And they're probably 2 of the world's most cold hardy in that group of palms.
Okay.
So over my head,
hang on, I got to put this one
over
here.
There. That's Butia odorata, which is one of the South American palms. It's known to be growing in some gardens in Cornwall, and so it can go down to quite low temperatures. It's comparatively slow growing, so that tree's probably 80 or 100 years old.
And if you just move slightly that's it there.
Yes, so you can see it behind
I want to point properly. Yes,
there we go.
It's that grey trunk here.
Yes, and the lovely grey fronds. So it's a very elegant and attractive palm, and I've got one growing in the garden at Macedon that's just starting to trunk up a little bit after about 10 to 12 years in the ground. So
someone else will have the pleasure of that palm, Stephen.
yeah, someone else will probably have the pleasure of pulling it out. But anyhow, I think it's a wonderful palm, and it is growing very well for me.
All right, so that's that one there, just to
Yes.
show you all. The two wonderful palms behind are not cold hardy
No.
palms. But if we then swing around
yes.
and we do a cunning bit of work there, what is that palm?
Now, that is
And I'm going to tilt the camera. This
Oh,
is
here we
so
go.
technical. And actually, viewers, this is the herbarium building
Oh,
behind
yes,
us.
good idea to put that into context. The palm that you can see over Matthew's
Coming right
there,
out of my head.
here, is Jubaea chilensis, the Chilean wine palm. It's threatened in the wild. There's smallish areas of it. I've been into a national park in central Chile where this tree is the main component, and there's not an enormous amount of regeneration going on, so they're actually planting more palms to keep it going. And it's a really beautiful palm. It will go down to around about the same temperatures as the Butia will, so it can go down to sort of minus 4 or 5
Degrees centigrade.
so,
I
yep.
will drop in the Fahrenheit conversion.
Yep. And it's an interesting palm in that it has quite a broad, swollen trunk.
Yeah.
And when it gets to flowering age, which normally takes between 30 and 50 years, the trunk will start to narrow. So you get this rather bottle shape to the trunk.
Now, I noticed that and thought, oh, maybe it's diseased
No.
or sick or
No.
went through a difficult patch.
It puts its energy back into growing its flowers and producing its seed.
Right.
So therefore the trunk narrows when the palm starts to bloom. So you get this quite classical bottle-shaped trunk. And to see a big stand of them in the wild, slightly eerie, a bit Dr. Seussish, I have to say.
Interesting. But other palms don't do that. So they can flower and that doesn't affect
Yeah.
the energy for vegetative growth.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It seems to just be the quirk in this particular palm.
Okay, why is it called a wine palm?
Because they did use it to make a wine substitute.
What?
Which killed the palm because they used the sap from the central crown of the palm.
Oh, so you
they
drill it?
tap the palm
Oh.
to get the sap out and create an alcoholic drink from it. I don't believe you can get Chilean wine palm wine anymore because the tree is very, very strongly protected in the wild.
Yes.
And I would have called it millionaire's wine because if you're going to kill a tree that's already perhaps 50 or 80 or 100 years old just to get a bottle of wine, somehow or another it seems inappropriate.
It does. And the only other palm I just want to quickly show our viewers is right here is a wonderful example of fortunei, which was that cold climate palm that we talked about. And this one has been trimmed beautifully.
Yeah, so it's got a nice, tidy, clean trunk.
All right, I think we're going to go and look at some more.
What a good idea.
Off we go. Well, there's fortunei, Stephen. But when it's a palm tree, not a palm tree.
When it's a cordyline, which is behind us here now, and a lot of people mistake them for palms, but they're not at all related. They're in a completely different plant family.
I must, though, my story about cordylines is, as a youth, I once worked for the summer season in Torquay in Britain, and that was billed as the English Riviera because it had rows of Cordyline australis, is that name?
Which
along
they
the
all
foreshore.
called palms. And I remember actually seeing an article in a local newspaper how they'd come unstuck when somebody pointed out that, in fact, what was growing along their streets was not, in fact, a palm tree.
However,
Yes.
if you're wanting the palm tree vibe and you are too cold for even the coldest palm, how cold will Cordyline australis go?
Well, it won't go right down to, Arctic levels, but it can go down to quite a low temperature. But I would have thought that in most climates, the Chinese windmill palm, the Trachycarpus, would be on a par of the cordyline. So
Which
if you can
happens to
grow
be-
one, you should be able to grow the other.
There's the Trachycarpus,
Yeah.
there's the Cordyline next to each other.
Yep, so there you go. So you don't necessarily have to settle for a cordyline just because you're in a cold climate.
There you go. They are great, though. They do something very specific. And they're faster growers than palms?
Yeah, cordylines can get up to a reasonable size quite quickly. But I have to say, Trachycarpus aren't far behind them. I mean, I've got three Trachycarpus in the garden at home. I've got at least one boy and one girl, I know, because I'm now getting seedlings popping up.
Because they're having fun.
Yes, they certainly are. And they've been in at about the same time as I planted one of my green-leafed cordylines, and they're on about a par size-wise after 20 years or so.
Oh, so in 20 years, so in a lifetime, you could actually get a trunk on your palm
Oh,
and
easily.
start to get a good head. Excellent. All right, well, this is not a palm tree. Let's go and find one that is.
All right, good idea.
What is this one? This fabulous, it looks like a ginkgo.
Yes, well, it's a fishtail palm.
Yep.
Caryota obtusa.
Yeah.
Comes from northern Laos and Cambodia, that sort of area.
Yeah.
Can only go down to about -4 Celsius. But there is another Caryota called Argentea himalaica, which
From the Himalayas.
yeah, from the Himalayas, which I've got in my garden at home, and it's settling in quite perfectly well, and it can go down to even lower temperatures. So it's probably the most cold hardy of all of the fishtail palms, and most of them, as I understand it, because I've not grown one to maturity yet, are what are often called suicide palms. In other words, monocarpic.
To say, flower and dies thing.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
a word for that, monocarp.
Yeah, there is. But
We've made a film about monocarp
we did indeed.
once.
But palm aficionados tend to call them suicide palms. So,
Right.
and there are a number of them around the world. So they put all their energy into growth for the first several decades and maybe even longer.
And then
they flower, and it's all over Red Rover, and they produce seed, and the next generation comes. I am told, though, my Himalayan fishtail palm is in fact not monocarpic, so if and when it ever seeds, it should keep going, which would be lovely.
kind of a risky strategy from an evolutionary perspective, isn't it?
Well,
To flower once.
yes and no. The advantage of it, of course, is that if you flower every year, then the predators that live off your flowers can build up to a certain level,
Yes.
and then they will eat most of your seed. Whereas if you decide to seed once every 50 or 80 years or whatever, you have a mass of seeds, there's not going to be enough predators around to clean up all the seed and eat it, so you have that advantage. So there you go, there is a reason for it.
That is very clever.
It is, and these palms seem to take it to another level. So there you go.
Okay, well, I love it. I love the form of this one. It'll be beautiful.
It's very unpalm-like in its fronds.
The leaves are
and you can
extraordinary.
see where the fishtail thing comes
You
from.
certainly can.
So that's Caryota obtusa, and as I said, the hardiest of them all, though, is Maxima in its form called Himalaica, which is just a beautiful palm of a similar vein, though, to look at.
There we go. Okay, on to the next.
Oh, well, Matthew, look behind you. Can you see those amazing palms in full
my
bloom?
goodness, they are stunning. What an elegant drape to the flower.
It is. It's a Mexican blue palm. My research tells me that this particular palm can go down to -10 degrees Celsius, so it will cope with quite a lot of frost. But how lucky are we to be able to find Brahea armata in full bloom? I might add, for those who are in deserty conditions, it's very drought tolerant. It comes from Mexico, Southern California, all down through that area. Grows in sandy soils, so it's very heat and dry tolerant. And it's one of the fan palms, so it has this rather beautiful grey-green fanny foliage. And these splendid flower heads, which I'm assuming you wait for some decades to see.
I was going to say, you might have to come to the Melbourne Botanic Gardens. Now there's two, so are they... We don't know if they're girl or boy, do we?
I think in the case of these ones, it doesn't matter. I think these ones are hermaphrodites.
Self-pollinating,
yeah.
non-binary palm tree.
Yeah, and they are just beautiful. So it's a lovely hardy species that can be grown certainly well around Melbourne. I could grow it up at Macedon.
Yeah.
Definitely worthwhile considering as a cold hardy palm.
And a lovely sort of grey tinge to the foliage.
It's beautiful. It's a really elegant and lovely palm.
Okay.
And I can't wait to have one that's flowering.
All right, on to the next.
All right. Well, Matthew, we've suddenly found ourselves in New Zealand, believe it or not.
And we've been there before. We'll link that video.
Yes, exactly. So here we have what the New Zealanders will say is the world's most southerly palm.
Yes.
Although the Chileans will say that their wine palm is. So there is some dispute there. I'll let somebody else sort that out for me. This is the well-known Nikau Palm, Rhopalostylis sapida. It's said to take a couple of decades to start forming a trunk, and a 10-metre tree might be 200 years old, so it can be quite a slow growing palm.
Yes.
But the colder climate the palm is, the more slow growing they do tend to be. So this will go down to about 4 or 5 degrees minus in Celsius. It does like a slightly sheltered site. It's a palm that tends to live in forests and things as an understory palm. and it grows on some of the offshore islands. There's forms of it, or maybe other species that grow on Norfolk Island, so quite a few of the Pacific islands have Rhopalostylis on them. Some authorities say it's all of one species, but in New Zealand it's well known that plants raised from seed from the Chatham Islands version of it is a much faster growing plant. Then I would definitely recommend it, because they will grow much faster and make a better landscape plant. But a beautiful thing, it's also sometimes known as a shuttlecock palm for obvious reasons.
Yes, I can see that.
But Nīkau Palm seems to be the most generally accepted common name for it, and a wonderful cool climate palm.
2 observations. We have flowers, and this is not a particularly old tree. All 3 of those are in bloom.
Although having said that, that could be 30 years old.
Okay, but that's...
Yeah.
It still seems quite low to the ground for flowers.
Yes, it does. But there you go. So it doesn't take that long to start producing seed, fortunately.
So the other thing is the frond types. So what are the types of fronds? Because you've referenced the palmates.
Yeah.
No, so what is it? The fan shaped?
Yeah, the fan-shaped palms, which are a group of palms in which some of the world's cold hardiest belong.
Yes.
And then there is those that have the feathery-like plume.
Like this one?
Yeah,
frondy,
like this. Yeah,
frondy
so
palm.
frondy palms. I'm not sure that's the technical term. So there's 2 basic forms of palms that they can fall into. So, of course, this one is a feather-shaped frond. And I'd suggest, again, one of the world's cold hardiest, although there's a bit of a toss-up between it and the Chilean wine palm.
Well, there we are. A great way to wrap up our cold hardy palms with possibly the cold hardiest.
Yes, exactly. And, we've only scratched the surface. I mean, there are a multitude of other palms that can be grown in cool climates. Who knows, we might wrap up with a few more in due course.
And there are some that are still being discovered. So there are some altitude palms from Vietnam and Southeast Asia that can go quite low.
Yep.
You've got some
some
babies.
of the Trachycarpus, some of the windmill palms that they've discovered more recently. Gemina sectors, one of them. Princeps is another. They're reputedly reasonably cold hardy palms. And in the feather type fronded ones, there's new species being named in Central and North America as well. So there's a lot more out there for us to learn about palms.
There you go. Well, I hope if you're wanting to plant palms and you're not in the tropics, this has been of some use.
Well, I hope so. And I do love them, because I can then pretend I'm in the tropics, so I can waft outside with my pina colada, sit under a palm tree and pretend I'm in the tropics.
In 5 degrees of cold. Well, this has been wonderful. Many thanks to Melbourne Botanic Gardens for letting us wander through. It's been great. Lots of children here today, which is great to see. The children.
Yes, they're engaging with it, and lots of tour groups coming through. You can join one of the guided tours of the Botanic Gardens here if you wish to do so.
It really is a high point, literally actually, because it overlooks the city, but a high point of Melbourne. So if you're coming to visit, do spend some time in the Botanic Gardens. Now, if you want to know what we're doing next week, you'll have to subscribe. We do post every week on a Friday.
And we do our shorts on a Monday. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask me that I can answer in 60 seconds, pop it in the comments below and I'll be happy to have a crack at it.
But until then, we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye all.